Man, preseason football is finally back. And I know the scoreboard wasn't what we wanted to see, but trust me, there was a lot more going on in this game than that final score tells you. Some of these young guys came out looking hungry, confident, and ready to make this roster battle seriously interesting. And there were a couple of performances that should have every Niners fan paying attention. Because if this continues, we could be watching the beginning of something really exciting. So stick with me, because we've got a lot to talk about. And before we get into it, hit that like button if you're ready for another season of Niners football, and drop "Bang Bang Niner Gang" in the comments if you're rocking with the faithful. Something may have happened in the 49ers preseason opener that matters far more than a 19-13 loss to Tennessee. Forget the scoreboard for a moment, because San Francisco walked away from this game with several young players demanding attention, and one performance in particular may have changed the conversation at wide receiver. The important context is that many of the 49ers' backups, second stringers, and third stringers were being tested against Tennessee's starters. And despite that disadvantage, some of San Francisco's youngest players looked like they belonged. The biggest story was second-round rookie wide receiver De'Zhaun Stribling. Training camp had already created expectations around Stribling because of his consistency, explosiveness, and ability to stand out within the receiver group. But preseason games are where those practice reports finally have to translate against another team. Against Tennessee, they did. Stribling was targeted 8 times and caught 7 passes for 63 yards, averaging 9 yards per reception, with a long catch of 32 yards. Those numbers were impressive, but they don't completely explain why his performance was so encouraging. It was the manner in which he made those catches that stood out. San Francisco made an obvious effort to get him involved early and repeatedly. At 6'2", Stribling showed the size that has been noticeable throughout camp, while his speed and explosiveness gave the defense another problem to deal with. Most importantly, he looked like a natural hands catcher. Instead of waiting for the football to reach his body, Stribling attacked it. That showed up when the catches became difficult. On one play, Stribling went up and high-pointed the football while a defensive back fought through his arms trying to disrupt the catch. Stribling maintained control. On another deep completion, he had to adjust his body to the football after tracking the throw downfield. He turned, located it, and made the adjustment rather than allowing an imperfect angle to ruin the opportunity. There was physicality, too. On a sideline reception on 3rd down, Stribling secured the football and then drove through defenders to pick up the first down. There was controversy over whether his toe had stepped out of bounds, but what mattered from an evaluation standpoint was what happened after the catch. He protected the football and showed he was willing to initiate contact. And according to the evaluation coming out of this game, his willingness to block adds another dimension to what San Francisco may have found. That is why the conversation around Stribling is quickly becoming more interesting than simply asking whether the rookie will get on the field. If what he has shown throughout training camp continues into the rest of the preseason, the bigger question becomes how many offensive snaps he deserves and how significant his role in the passing game can become. There is always danger in overreacting to preseason football. Every August produces players who put up impressive numbers and then disappear when rosters are reduced to 53. But Stribling's case is different in one important respect. This wasn't an isolated performance. What happened against Tennessee was presented as a continuation of what he had already been doing throughout camp. And he wasn't the only young 49er who created intrigue. Quarterback Curtis Rourke finally got his opportunity to play in an NFL game, and his performance gave San Francisco another potentially important developmental storyline. Brock Purdy did not dress, and Mac Jones did not suit up either, opening the door for Rourke to receive significant playing time. He responded by completing 12 of 14 passes for 101 yards and posting a 96.7 passer rating. For a quarterback getting his first NFL game action after essentially spending the previous season as a developmental redshirt, that was an encouraging beginning. Rourke had entered the league after playing at Indiana, where he demonstrated considerable toughness by playing through a torn ACL. San Francisco selected him in the 7th round of the 2025 NFL Draft, but the injury prevented him from participating normally in the pre-draft process and significantly limited what he could do afterward. Against Tennessee, the 49ers finally got to see what that patience might produce. Rourke displayed good size, arm strength, accuracy, and perhaps most surprisingly, mobility. His decision-making appeared quick. He seemed to understand where the football needed to go, and he was willing to challenge tight windows. His connection with Stribling on the deep completion was one of the clearest examples. Rourke placed the football toward the sideline, away from the defensive back, giving his receiver an opportunity to adjust and make the play. There was one concern. Rourke suffered a rib injury on a quarterback draw in the red zone later in the game. But before that happened, he had done enough to make the backup quarterback situation considerably more intriguing. And there is another layer to this story that 49ers fans should be watching closely throughout the preseason. Rourke isn't necessarily competing only for a temporary roster position. If he continues developing behind Purdy and Jones, San Francisco could be evaluating whether it already has a future number 2 quarterback developing inside Kyle Shanahan's system. But the rookies on offense weren't alone. Linebacker Jaden Duggar produced one of the defensive plays that immediately jumped off the screen. The 5th-round pick out of Louisiana had previously played defensive back at Georgetown before transitioning to linebacker, and that background showed when he was forced to operate in space. On one early snap, Duggar dropped into coverage and read Titans quarterback Cam Ward. With nothing immediately available downfield, Ward escaped toward his right. Duggar remained patient rather than losing his positioning, then accelerated toward Ward and made a clean open-field tackle. That single rep showed exactly why his athletic profile is so intriguing. Length, speed, range, and the ability to close space quickly. And the deeper we go into this game, the more encouraging the defensive story becomes, because another rookie defensive back produced a rep against one of Tennessee's most dangerous young weapons that deserves much more attention. Before we get into that matchup, and the other young 49ers who may have helped themselves significantly against Tennessee, I want to know what you think. Was De'Zhaun Stribling the most impressive player in this preseason opener? Or did someone else stand out more to you? Drop your answer in the comments. And when you put everything together, that might be the most important takeaway from this preseason opener. The 49ers lost 19-13 to Tennessee, but the final score was never going to define this night. What mattered was finding out which young players could handle NFL competition, which backups could push for meaningful roles, and which rookies might be ready to contribute sooner than expected. And San Francisco came away with several encouraging answers. De'Zhaun Stribling was at the center of everything. 7 catches on 8 targets for 63 yards only tell part of the story. The strong hands, the ability to attack the football, the adjustment on the deep pass, the physicality after the catch, and the willingness to compete through contact made his performance feel different from an ordinary preseason breakout. Training camp had already generated excitement around him, and then he carried that momentum directly onto the field. Now, the question is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Just how large could Stribling's role become in this offense? Curtis Rourke gave the 49ers another reason for optimism. Completing 12 of 14 passes for 101 yards in his first NFL game action was an encouraging start, especially after the long road he traveled just to get onto the field. His accuracy, decision-making, arm talent and connection with Stribling provided a glimpse of why San Francisco could view him as an intriguing developmental quarterback. Defensively, Jaden Duggar flashed his athleticism and closing speed. The young secondary held up against Tennessee, while the defensive front generated pressure, and young players such as Grayson Halton showed they could potentially fight their way into rotational roles. Even the punting game offered encouraging signs, with Corliss Waitman demonstrating both leg strength and the ability to pin Tennessee deep. There were mistakes. Brandon Parker's false start was costly. San Francisco still showed vulnerability against screens on third down. Not every snap was clean, and nobody should pretend that one preseason game guarantees what these players will become. But that's exactly why this performance should have the attention of 49ers fans. Preseason isn't about proving that a team is ready to win a championship. It's about discovering players who can become important when the games actually count. And after this first test, San Francisco suddenly has several young names worth following very closely. Now, I want to hear from you. Who impressed you the most against Tennessee? Is Stribling already earning a significant role in this offense? And what did you think about Rourke and this young 49ers defense? Drop your opinion in the comments, because I want to see where Niners fans stand after this performance. And if you want to stay on top of everything happening with San Francisco throughout the preseason and into the regular season, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next 49ers update. The preseason has only just begun, but if this first game showed us anything, it's that some very interesting roster battles are only getting started.